Come join Melissa and her guests on the Chats from the Blog Cabin podcast. From North Carolina, this podcast will have you feeling like you've known these folks for years. Listen in as they chat about life, culture, current events, and more, all with a special Southern flair. Curl up with your favorite beverage and get ready to be entertained. Tune in now for a unique experience that's fun and insightful.
Hey y'all, welcome back to another episode of Chats from the Blog Cabin. You know, the show where I virtually invite people into the blog cabin to chat about life. And today I'm joined by Terry. He's a cancer survivor, an author, and a speaker whose story is all about resilience. Guess what? Guess what we're going to be talking about today? Being resilient and what it truly means to be resilient. So welcome to the show, Terry, and tell us a little about yourself before we talk about your book, The Resilience Mindset.
Right. Thanks, Melissa, for having me as a guest. Yeah, so a little bit about myself and what we'll talk about, I guess, is that I was faced with a life-threatening cancer that was facially disfiguring when I was just 21, but I found a way to build resilience, and I found a way to build a successful career in high tech after that ordeal as a marketing exec, author, and keynote speaker. It's a lot about the methods and tools that I found ways to employ to help move me in a positive direction despite the turmoil that I felt that I was under.
So let's talk about that. What led you to that? The sarcoma, your sarcoma journey. Age 21, I can't even imagine what that would be like. I mean, because honestly, for most young people, it's all about vanity and everything. And then you have something so, life-changing happen to you.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I like to say I was living life on easy street, Melissa. I was a junior at UC Berkeley. Life was going well. I had actually been a homecoming prince. So when you talk about, or when I talk about a disfiguring cancer, it changed everything for me. When I was faced with that, it came out of the blue, literally, and wasn't even something I noticed, but steered me on a whole new journey that I wasn't prepared for, and I had to figure.
Yeah. So of course, a lot of that was like vanity. You have to really kind of learn to love yourself again, and the self-esteem issues and everything. And I love the fact that you talk about in the book about how you met your wife and how your wife saw beyond that. And that just kind of helped boost yours as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I think that when you're just 21, to your earlier point, appearances matter a whole lot. And when you're that age, you're very self-conscious, and you begin to think that everybody is noticing your difference. But, as I learned over time, it's like people aren't looking at you. They really aren't. You've got to get over that. You think you're the center of attention because you look different. But the honest truth is people don't notice you. You have to learn how to become content and confident with who you are. And there's a whole bunch of work that you have to do, unfortunately, but it's part of life for everybody in some respects, right? Building self-confidence, finding a way to gain your self-esteem back. But I certainly went from the top of being self-confident to being all the way back to the bottom before I could figure out how to rise back up.
So let's talk about that journey a little bit. When you first was diagnosed and then the surgery, I mean, even the picture that you put in your book of after your surgery, I was like, wow, I can't even imagine what you were going through.
Yeah, so the diagnosis was a fibrosarcoma, which is an incredibly rare type of cancer. Typically does not occur in the head and neck. It's usually in the extremities. And so when I was faced with this, so I had a recurrence actually of the cancer that necessitated the removal literally of half my nose, the shelf of my right eye, the muscle and the bone from my right cheek, part of my upper lip, part of my hard palate, and 6 of my teeth. And the picture you're referring to, I was attached to my chest because they had to transplant a full thickness skin graft from my chest to fill in this cavity that had been created on my face. And so when I woke up, suddenly I went from this easy street life to realizing that not only did I now look like the Elephant Man, but I had a life-threatening situation on my hands. So the whole world was turned upside down overnight.
So how did you get there? Obviously, resilience was part of it, but how did you what steps did you first start taking to get through that? Because I know a lot of people are going to say, well, I'm facing something like this. How do I begin? How do I, what is the very first step that I can take?
Yeah. So for me, I kind of think about my own survival kit, and there's a number of things in it, but One was that I had a foundation of faith that gave me tremendous courage. It gave me strength. And importantly, it gave me hope, which is, you need hope to be resilient in any way, shape, or form. I was also, this was tough, Melissa, but I was someone that figured out pretty quick that I had to surround myself with people that were positive, that I could trust, that made me feel good, that brought positive energy. So part of that was just, making sure I was surrounded by the right people and removing myself from people that felt toxic to me. That was really important too, to have a support system, right? Because you can't do it on your own. You really need outside forces to help you get through it. But one of the things, and since you read the book, you probably noticed this, but when I woke up, one of the things I did recognize was that they saved my eye. And that was one of the risks, was that they were also going to remove my right eye. So I had gratitude for that. And I think that might have helped me in my life to always remind myself to be grateful for all that I did have, because there's so many things that I still had going for me, despite this horrific situation that was happening. So gratitude really gives you that positive mindset that helps you look at life differently. And we choose our attitude. So that's one way to help choose your attitude, is start with gratitude and realize how much there is to be grateful for. Yeah, there were a number of things, but those were a few of them. And then, I'll touch on one other, is focus, goal setting. I was, again, I thank my parents for this. My father in particular was someone that really helped me stay focused throughout my life. And so when that time came, when I was dealing with this challenge, it really became a lot about, how am I going to deal with this? I got to get laser focused on dealing with one major issue in my life right now. And how do I just find a way to address that, deal with that, face it every day? And baby steps really helped me to begin to move my life forward, so that I could, over time, Melissa, begin to rebuild some confidence.
Yeah, I love how you said over time, because a lot of people think, oh, it's supposed to happen right away, and it doesn't. It's a whole mindset change. And I love also the fact that you were talking about how you were grateful that they didn't take your eye, that you have to focus on what you can be grateful for. Because I know right before we came on, I told you about the mentoring and how I'm interviewing so many people about mentoring, and then you just talked about gratefulness, and that's what's in my Bible devotion this morning, was about gratefulness. So
Yeah.
I'm getting some messages here.
Yeah, absolutely.
So now it's like a really we can actually go to commercials, since we're at kind of like a laughing stopping point. But when we come back, you're gonna read from your book.
Yeah.
In a world full of chaos, she chose to anchor her story in hope. Through storms and silence, she found strength, and now she's inviting you to do the same. This isn't just a book, it's a lifeline. For every woman who's ever felt unseen, your healing begins here. Anchored in hope. Available now.
And we are back with Terry, and Terry is going to read part of his book, The Resilience Mindset. So Terry, it is all yours.
Right. So I'll start reading, from a section that starts right when I had the initial surgery. So when I had the original diagnosis, was told that my situation was promising, in the respect that they were able to catch what they thought was the tumor in an early stage. There was a risk that it could recur, but now I'm at a point in my life where I'm kind of thinking, okay, I might have dodged a bullet. I can return to normal and start to feel invincible again. So this is before all the recurrence. So I'll start there. Life became normal again, and I was told that immediate follow-up was unnecessary. No radiation or chemotherapy. I returned to my usual 20-year-old ways. I felt invincible. Dr. Crumley was confident they had been able to remove the tumor. But 6 months later, I began to feel tingling sensations in my cheek. It felt like ants were crawling under my right cheek and upper right lip, and the tissue felt raised. I recalled my doctor saying that if I had a recurrence, corrective surgery could result in deformity and severe scarring. Panic set in. I went back to see my doctor, and after his examination, he believed that a recurrence was probable. I was scheduled quickly for a CT scan to confirm the return of the malignant mass. But given the potential severity of what I was facing, he also scheduled me for surgery right away, too, just in case. My worst fears were coming true. My doctor decided to get me slotted into the UCSF tumor board schedule right away as well. The opinions of other UCSF specialists were deemed necessary. Everything happened extremely quickly. There was a tremendous sense of urgency in everything that took place. So here's the situation. My parents and my brother Rob came with me to the tumor. I was examined by 15 physicians of varying specialties, and it was anything but a calming experience. One after the other, the doctors examined my face, pushing, pressing, and prodding at my facial tissue as if it were Play-Doh. Every doctor started out by touching and pressing my right cheek where the mass was most prominent. Then each of them palpated the skin all the way up to my tear duct. I started to feel like a lifeless lab specimen, and maybe to them I was. It was striking that none of them asked questions of me. The only interaction was a brief "Hello, Terry," followed by their quick introduction, name, and specialty. The doctors could have been blindfolded during their examinations of me, as they seemed to only be relying on their sense of touch. It struck me that during their brief assessments, they looked up at the ceiling as if they didn't want to hurt my feelings by looking directly at me with insincere smiles of hopefulness. I felt like I was the focus of an experiment that was being rushed because they were on a tight schedule. Two of the doctors who examined me expressed their findings by shaking their heads back and forth. Was that the way to behave in front of a cancer patient who was becoming increasingly concerned about his own survival? How could they? I will never forget the images of their two faces. Dr. Crumley met with us after the examinations and a collaborative tumor board discussion that ensued. "I'm sorry for the delay," he said. "Most of the other cases today were more straightforward than yours, and most of the time was spent on your case." My heart sank. This wasn't going to be the news I was hoping for. I felt a lump forming in my throat. Then my heart started to beat faster and faster. We also had some differing opinions, and that kept the discussion going on longer than usual. "So here's the situation." He paused. "Terry, this is very serious. You may lose half of your nose, your columella, the tissue between your nostrils, half of your upper lip, and possibly your right eye." The silence in the room was deafening. My heart began thudding so hard that I thought everyone could hear it. My mother and I stared at each other in disbelief, speechless. How could this tiny cancer have suddenly turned into a horrific, possibly disfiguring, and life-threatening disease? I was numb, like the frozen lab specimen I had felt like during the examination. I began to feel sick to my stomach. Stop there.
I can't even imagine what you were going through. First of all, to have the doctors look at you and make those faces, they're supposed to be they're supposed to have bedside manners, and yet they didn't have that. And that could obviously shake your world. And then when they come back with that diagnosis, you're like, wow.
Never forget their two faces. Never. Yeah. One was the head of the department, believe it or not, the head of the otolaryngology department, which is head and neck cancer. The other was an ophthalmologist. And I knew she was an ophthalmologist. And so I think what her reaction was the most concerning, because that was about my eye. Right.
Have you gone back and seen the doctors now and say, look at what you said was going to happen, and look what is happening, look at what I've done, and just kind of like not really rub it in their faces, but show them that the way they were looking at you and their looks and their discussions with each other, how that could have impacted you in the worst way?
No, I didn't, but I did stay in touch with two of the doctors. One who was my surgeon, Dr. Crumley, who I refer to in my book. I see him every summer, Melissa, which is amazing. He's in his late 70s now, greatest guy. I'm thankful to him every day, and I tell him whenever I see him. The other one I still see and talk to is the guy who built the prosthetic for me, who was just this incredibly kind person who had a very different approach than those two that I'm referring to. He was all about being proactive and thinking about, hey, what might happen? How can I help this patient come out of this feeling better? And so I chose to stay in touch with those two, and I'm so glad I did.
Well, I love that. And I love the fact that one daughter's 70 years old, and your case probably made an impact on his life as well, to say, hey, look at this kid that came in and look at what he's done with his life. I mean, he was 21. That could have totally destroyed your life, but instead you chose to go forward and be resilient and grow something that's even more amazing.
Yeah, I think that's very true. And again, his giving me hope which he was so kind to do and so gracious to do, really helped give me a shot in the arm when I needed it most.
So did you have any inkling anything was wrong before you started feeling like your face was just like, could they tell you how long it had been there or anything like that?
They really didn't know. What prompted it was that my right nostril was starting to get flared out. And so there was a bump, kind of like if you put your tongue up above your front teeth and you go as high as you can reach with your tongue, you could feel a little lump there. And that's where it may have started. And then it started pushing forward into my nasal and maxillary area. So I was just lucky that it was big enough and visible enough and all of that they could identify it quickly. How long it had been there, I have no idea. But it is a cancer that typically occurs in people between about 15 and 20 years old. So it's very narrow in terms of its diagnosis. And I was 20 when I was diagnosed with it. So
Wow, I can't even imagine going through that. So let's talk about how you were able to get that resilient mindset and why you wanted to write this book about the resilient mindset, because I think everybody needs to read this book. I mean, I read it this past weekend and I was like, I cannot wait to talk to you. I cannot wait to talk to you because some of the things that that would have normally dragged anybody down, you seem to be able to emerge from it. I mean, yeah, you had a few moments where you're like, okay, yes, you're human. I can't believe this is happening to me. Or like when you met your wife, I don't know why she wanted to talk to me, that type of thing. But yet you still managed to rise above it and get out of the gutter thinking or the stinking thinking and become that resilient person. So let's talk about why you decided to write the book and then what actually resiliency means to you.
yeah. So I would say that during the course of my ordeal, I was learning a lot about myself, how much strength I could find, how much grit that I have, right? And that was tough. It was a long journey. It was many years. And I developed what I talk a lot about as a survival kit. And what prompted the book actually was that during some speaking engagements that I would do, where I would tell my personal story, and then I would share how I survived it and sort of the people that I interacted with that transformed me, one being my wife. Then I would get into other methods. And people would always say, not always, but after my presentations, many times people would come up to me and say, I read your first book at face value, which was a memoir, and I listened to you today, and what you talk about is things that aren't in your first book that really help others create something that creates a framework for other people to become more resilient and to build resilience. You need to write another book. And so really that's what prompted it, was other people coming to me and saying, you talk about this stuff, you should write about it. And so that's what I did. And, I would just say, I'll touch on this. I think we all have the capacity to build resilience. We can learn to adapt. We recover from setbacks, and we actually all grow stronger from our experience. So I think we all have the capacity. That's the most important thing. We can build resilience. All of us have the capability to do that.
So what is resiliency to you?
Resilience to me is really about honing in on the tools that work for you personally, right? What are the things that are going to give you continued hope and optimism? And so I think there's common threads that all of us can sort of leverage. I've talked about a few of them already, right? It's not, faith isn't for everybody, but that is a form of something that gives you hope, right? I would say that starting with gratitude is one of the best, because I can tell you stories of people, and you read the book, so you know what the last section is about, right? People that survive unbelievable, seemingly insurmountable obstacles, come out the other side. They also practice gratitude. And I think that gratitude puts you in that positive mindset and helps you to think about the good things in your life. And pretty quickly you start to realize that, adversity, change, these are temporary things. They're not permanent. And I think that's one of the most important things for people to remember, is that when they hit a dark spot, sometimes they think, oh my God, how am I ever going to recover from this? Well, know that there is some work that you can do, but know that it is temporary. You will get through this. We all have some form of inner strength. We just got to dig deep sometimes to find it.
So why did you feel like you should include the other stories in the back of the book? Because I thought that was really such a strength point, because somebody may not have been dealing with what you dealt with, but there were other stories. So why did you decide to include that? And I love the fact that you also included how you could get in touch with them as well.
Yeah, no, great question. My wife actually suggested that. She said, you're writing about your own story, and she keeps me grounded, right? She's like, it's not all about you. I think that it could be way more powerful if you talk to people and find out, does your methodology, does your rebar framework resonate with them? And so that's what I did, Melissa, is I contacted people and I had conversations with them and said, tell me about how you survived. And I shared with them my framework. And what I found was there's a lot of commonalities. People that deal with major adversity rely on very similar methods to help them get through. And many of us become grateful for the experience because it gave us a new purpose. And all those people that I talk about in the book, those 7 individuals that I profile, have very different experiences, very different adversities, have very common sort of outcomes in terms of how it gave them a new purpose.
So I have 2 follow-up questions to that. The first one is, do you ever think you would write another book just profiling the people that had that diversity or had that stuff happen in the adversity, and just kind of do a whole profile book on each person, like a chapter book?
Yeah, it's really interesting that you asked that question, because I actually put together a proposal for another book, which is really all about how to find purpose in life. And so how better to demonstrate that than with real stories. One of my best friends, who's in the acknowledgments, Tyler Higgins, said to me after he read the book, he said, it reminds me of Profiles in Courage. I don't know if you remember the JFK book, but very different, right? His stories are about people that had courage in a government and a political type environment. But the concept of sharing other stories to deliver the power of a message is I think is really powerful. So yes, I have thought about that, but that's coming.
Oh, good. And the second one, you talked about the rebar framework. So let's talk about that.
Yeah, so rebar is really a framework that I built it's sort of a way to package up a lot of the learnings that I have in a prescriptive format for other people to follow. It's 4 steps. And the idea is that it's embedded, and I'll talk about each one of them, but the idea is that it's embedded with a number of questions for the reader. The idea being that if you answer these questions about your own personal situation, you can help create a personalized approach to how you're going to deal with your adversity and have something actionable to take away. So the 4 components are reflect, build, act, and renew. Should I talk about each one of those really briefly? So reflect is really about taking the time each day to reflect. And what do I mean by reflect? Well, it's finding quiet time, whether it's in the morning, during the day, or at night, to start with gratitude. Think about all the things you're grateful for, because that puts you in a more positive mindset. And then it's really about kind of doing an audit of your day and thinking about, what did I learn today? Did I learn anything today? Was I inspired by anything today? If I was inspired by something, can I apply it to my life tomorrow? The idea is that you create a practice of doing this. You won't have an inspiration every single day, but you'll start to recognize things when they happen. The point is that if you don't take time to reflect, you forget most. You and I have so many conversations every day, right? You forget the conversations you have, somebody that you met in the grocery store. And those are the kinds of conversations I'm talking about. It's not just the ones with your close friends and family. It's other conversations that you have. The next phase is really build, which is about developing that positive mindset, developing a growth mindset. So this is when you focus on how you're going to find life balance, how you're going to develop that support network and that support system, and how you're going to choose positive. Because when you do those things, it makes it much easier to navigate life's challenges with positivity and optimism instead of uncertainty or doubt. The third phase is act. So this is kind of when the rubber meets the road, right? This is when you start to literally face challenges. This is when you start to take control. And this is when you get focused and set goals. So I consider this execution phase, execution mode. This is the thickest part of rebar because there's so many tools and methods that you can choose from, because one size doesn't fit all. And then finally, the last phase is called renew. And renew is really the reinforcement of the process. It's kind of the commitment to this process to keep you on the right path, knowing that if you've reached this point, you've survived your adversity, your ordeal. So celebrate that, celebrate your wins. That helps you build confidence back. It helps you gain your self-esteem back. And then it's a time to think about the traits and characteristics that you embody that helped you to get through this ordeal, because that's really important to building confidence too. But really the idea is to learn from what you experienced and try to become a better version of who you are every day.
Yeah, and I love the fact that you talk about the very first one. It's like reflecting, and it's like the 5-minute journal. I don't know if you've heard about the 5-minute journal,
Yeah.
where you have to write down like 3 things that really went great in your day, and then you like reflect on what you could have done differently, or how things could have acted, and how you could have reacted to things differently. So I love that. That's definitely part, because when we start looking within, that's when we start realizing, hey, we have so much to be grateful for, and we have so much, this going on in our life, but it's not going to define who I am. So you talk about the scars on the inside are worse than those on the outside. What? I so feel that. I felt that when your publicist sent that over to me. I'm like, I think everybody will understand that, because a lot of people, they don't want to share their true selves. They don't want to share about the journey that they went through. I mean, I applaud you for writing your story, and for sharing, and for not only writing your memoir, but writing this other book. And now you have another book that you're in the process of writing. But just being able to share your journey so that somebody else can get hope from your journey.
I think that we're always our own worst critics, and we think that how we appear on the outside is something that we're never satisfied with. But yeah, I learned through a difficult experience that it had nothing. A relationship that I had with somebody had nothing to do with how I looked. It was about the insecurity that I had within. And so it turned my life around, because it forced me to say, I can't just live having surgery to try to improve my appearance. It's never going to fix the person that I am. It might make me look a little better, but I'm always going to be my own worst critic. I'm never going to be satisfied with that. So how do I rebuild within? And I think, you touched on it a second ago. It's kind of, people don't share their vulnerabilities, but when I went to a support group, I found the courage to share my vulnerabilities. That was one of the most liberating things that I did, right? And when you do that, other people open up to you and they share their stories. And that's what, in my opinion, that's what the value of the therapy was all about, these group settings, talking to people that I didn't know. And I think that's important too, because when you talk to people that you don't know, they will respond differently than your support system, right? Your family and friends are going to tell you when you're in the middle of an ordeal that you're great, you're the best, you're strong. And you need that. I'm not discouraging people from having that. But at the same time, sometimes you need a dose of other reality to help set you straight and say, I'm not great. I've actually got issues that I need to solve inside. How am I going to do that? So that was really a critical step for me in turning point.
It's almost like you needed that extra person to tell you, that didn't know you on a day-to-day basis, to say, hey, yes, I understand what you're going through, but you can't let that define how you're going to react or how you're going to be to other people. And you've got to work on how you react instead of how other people react to you.
100%. Yep. Agree.
So is there any tips that you would give to anybody that's maybe been going through something that's not as, I don't want to say catastrophic, because it's not catastrophic, because it is life-changing though, as your sarcoma, or something that maybe just for anybody that may have any kind of difficulties in life?
First of all, I think we have to remind ourselves that we should believe in ourselves, that we have the ability to build resilience, right? Some people, I've encountered along the way that think either have it or you don't. I don't agree with that. I think that it's something that you can build. And it goes back to, and I hate to sound like a broken record, but it kind of goes back to gratitude, because, there's a guy I talk about in my book. You read it. This gentleman who survived 2 major adversities, left him paralyzed. The other burned a significant amount of his body. And I'll never forget what he said, which was that, before all of this, there were 10,000 things that I could do. Now there's 9,000. I can either focus on the 1,000 that I've lost, or I can focus on the 9,000 that I can still do. So I heard that from him, God, 30, 40 years ago. And it's just always stuck with me.
Yeah, I love that. Focus on what you can do instead of what you can't do, because a lot of people focus on what they can't do. Even like, for instance, like for me and in my everyday life, the blogging and the podcasting and everything, it's like I don't like any of the technical stuff and I can't do any of that. So, to be able to say, hey, you know what? I'm not going to focus on that. I'm going to focus on what I do well, and maybe look for people to help you along the way with things that you can't do well.
Takes a village.
So our time is almost up. Is there one last little tidbit that either something we touched upon that you want to reiterate, or something that we didn't touch upon that you would like to talk about? The floor is yours. That is before we start talking about where you can find a book and where they can find you. That's going to come up next.
Yeah, I would say ancillary to what we talked about, I just always try to encourage people to be open, to be aware, alert, and attentive to what's happening around you, because people and events will happen that will have an impact on you if you're open to it. And that's really what changed my life, was people that I met along the way, events that happened along the way that became true turning points. I didn't anticipate them. But if you're open to it and you're just alert to what's happening and aware to what's happening around you, I think some amazing inspirations can come your way. And it's not that you have to change your life overnight. You reflect on it and think about, I learned something today. Is this something that might help me in my life? And the bottom line is, we don't have all the answers ourselves. And that's why there's however many billion people there are on this planet. Everybody's got a different experience and a different perspective. So it's good to take advantage of what's around you.
For sure. And I want to go back to something real quick. I didn't say that you were also a speaker. How did that unfold? How did you get into that speaking role? Because I think that's very important. Reading your book is one thing, but when you actually go out and you engage in a crowd, and I know people are coming up to you going, wow, thank you for coming. Thank you for sharing your story, and you do it in such a way that it's not just all about your story. It's about everything else. It's about that resilience. It's about that gratitude.
That started really not intentionally. So that started because I wrote this memoir back in 2001. I rewrote it in 2006 with a new publisher. When that book came out, each time it opened up all these new audiences that would say, hey, you wrote this book. It's really interesting. Can you come speak to our group? And it wasn't something that I intentionally tried to do, but what I found was it became really my greater purpose, because I felt like, man, I can help other people with this. And people are inspired by it, and they feel like there's some tools that can help them. And in any crowd, even if you're only helping a couple of people, it's worthwhile, right? And so that's what having a purpose is all about. And so it just happened that way, and just I'm grateful for that too.
Yeah, I love that. I love that so much. And I love the fact that you didn't take something that could have easily been life-changing. Well, it was life-changing for you, but you didn't take it in a direction that it could have gone the other way, and you chose to do something positive with it to help others. And I think that's important. That I think a lot of times when we get so caught up on what's wrong with us and what's going on with us, that we don't want to direct it to say, hey, I want to share my story so it helps others. So I applaud you for that.
Thank you. It'd be a waste if I didn't, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's a reason that people survive these things. And I think that that's the gift that comes from it.
For sure. Now, where can people find you?
So they can find me on my website, terryhealey.com, which you have on the screen, I believe. And there's information about my speaking, the audiences I speak to, the presentations I talk about, different topics, as well as my books and resources for people that are going through difficulties in their own lives. So there's that. And then I'm active on social media. So Terry Healey US is my Instagram. And then LinkedIn is just Terry Healey. So.
And you also have X or Twitter.
Yep.
For people that don't know. which is
Yep.
Terry Healey US. And let's talk about the YouTube channel.
Yeah, so YouTube channel. So I've got some of my past speaking engagements or clips from them, some of the highlights of things I cover, some media interviews. So all of that is constantly being updated. So feel free to subscribe to that, and you'll get my videos.
And then the resilience mindset, where is that available?
Yeah, so the resilience mindset is on Amazon. It's anywhere that you can buy books. It's also available on my website. So yeah, I encourage you to check it out.
And I encourage everybody to check it out as well, because I will say that this one, I don't know if you know my backstory. I lost both my dad and my sister to cancer. My sister was 27 years old when she died from cancer, and I was pregnant with my first daughter at the time. And so that's 30 some years ago, and I still feel her death to this day. It still hurts me. But my dad was exposed to Agent Orange in Vietnam and also the contaminated water at Camp Lejeune, so he got a double whammy. The Agent Orange was non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and the contaminated water turned it into simple lymphatic leukemia, and he ended up dying. But even during the years that he was dying, 1998 he was diagnosed, 2015 he passed away, but he was giving back to the community. He was involved with the veterans, he was involved with the Lions Club, he was involved with all this other stuff because he knew the legacy of giving back, and that's what he taught me, to give back. And actually, I told you right before, when my daughter was studying environmental toxicology, it was because it was triggered by her grampy being that affected by the air. She's studying air pollution right now, but that kind of made her go into looking at the chemicals and everything else that we put out in the universe for the people to use. So I think people seeing your story will say, hey, there's something positive that came from that. We can't always think of, oh, cancer is a death sentence, or this is a death sentence, or this is the end of my life. It did change the trajectory of your life, but it changed it into such a way that you're like do you think you would have even gone the way that you did if that hadn't happened to you?
Oh, no. I think my life is much more fulfilling and rich because of the experience. And I'm sorry for your losses. I think that fortunately there's gifts that sounds like have come from those.
Yeah, there are huge gifts that come from there. And I also think that you probably wouldn't have met your wife either if you hadn't gone through that, would you?
No, I'm sure I wouldn't have. So all these things happen, and yeah, I think the trajectory was probably very different. I think I'm just a better person because of it.
I love that when you say that, because a lot of people ask, like, if you could go back and change anything in your life, would you? And my question used to be yes, and I wouldn't have had my sister died or my dad died, but now it's like no, because I wouldn't be the person I am today if I hadn't had to go through all this stuff. So I think you can say the same thing.
Absolutely. You know, I heard a podcast recently about a guy was asked that question. It was really interesting. He said, well, if there's 1,000 people in a bucket, would you trade for any one of those? And in that bucket was, you can pick anything. There's going to be probably what your dream is or your dream was at some point. And the guy said, absolutely not. The choices I made, the experiences that I've had have made me who I am. I would never change that. And it sounds like you're there. I'm definitely there.
Yeah, it's a growth process though, and people can't just get there overnight. A lot of people we're so in this society where we want everything quick, like Amazon next day delivery, or
Right.
we can go to our phone. Before, I know, probably when we were growing up, probably we had to do research paper in the encyclopedia or go to the library and spend hours in the library. Now you can just Google something and it comes straight up.
Yep, Britannica, Encyclopedia Britannica.
Yep.
Remember
And
it
hours
well.
in the library trying
Yeah.
to research. Yep.
Remember it well.
So Terry, thank you for coming on and for sharing your story. And I'm going to give you the invitation when that second book comes out, or the third book, not the second, the third book comes out. Please contact me. I would love to get you back on because I think your story is uplifting. I think this is what the world needs right now. We need more uplifting stories instead of stories about everything that's wrong with the world. We need to have stories about what can be right in our world.
100% agree. Thank you. I appreciate, Melissa, you having me as a guest. It was a great conversation.
Thank you. Okay, guys, I will upload and put in the show notes everywhere you can find Terry, as well as his first book and links to his second book. and some other things that we talked about. Until next time, bye. Well, friends, that's it for today's chat here in the Blog Cabin. I hope something we shared sparked a thought, warmed your heart, or gave you a little encouragement for your journey. If you enjoyed today's episode, do me a favor, make sure you're subscribed so you never miss a new conversation. And if you'd like to spread a little love, leave a review or share this episode with someone who needs it. Remember, this little cabin isn't just mine, it's ours. It's a space where we show up, share stories, and shine a little light together. Until next time, keep living with hope, keep anchoring yourself in love, and never forget, you've got a seat saved here in the Blog Cabin. Take care, friends, and I'll see you in the next episode.